Hello, welcome to our third episode of From the Cheap Seats, your weekly internet show that highlights the weekend news. On this episode, I will talk with Washington University professor Dr. Hilary Anger Elfenbein on the struggles of teaching online in the COVID atmosphere and what higher education institutions are doing to ready for the fall semester. We will examine the current trend of moving Confederate monuments. And then in our last segment, we're going to look at the spike in COVID-19 as more states open up. But first, who is Tim Scott and why is he in the news? Well, Tim Scott is a Republican senator from South Carolina who also happens to be Black. Tim Scott has the same anxieties of any other Black man, even though he's a Republican. I know some people think Black Republican's an oxymoron, but he is a Black Republican. But he has those same anxieties. I'm sure when he's driving in his car and he sees that state trooper with the lights on behind him, I'm sure that he has the anxieties that all Black men have. How is this going to end? Are they going to be belligerent with me? So on and so forth. On June 17th, Tim Scott introduced the Justice Act that called for police reform. And I'm going to call it police reform on here. I'm not going to call it defunding the police because defunding the police is a loaded word. People don't understand it. They think we're going to try to take all the money away from the police and we're going to have lawlessness. We're going to revert back to Tombstone, so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that. So I'll use police reform. On Wednesday, June 24th, Scott's legislation, the Justice Act, needed 60 votes to proceed to debate in the Senate. Just to proceed to debate. Just to say, let's open up some dialogue. It fell 5 votes short, with only three Democrats, supporting opening debate. Now, Scott has proposed incentivizing police departments on banned chokeholds, but he hasn't mandated that the practice be abolished, kind of a sticking point. The bill also does not remove qualified immunity, the doctrine that shields law enforcement officers from personal liability. Qualified immunity is a huge deal. It is designed to protect all but the plainly incompetent or those who knowingly violate the law. Law enforcement officers are entitled to qualified immunity when their actions do not violate a clearly established statutory or constitutional right. All that to say this, cops love qualified immunity because it shields their personal life from their professional life. So if they have an issue on the job in their professional life, like we have seen on video, well, their personal life is immune to that unless you can prove that they are plainly incompetent or they knowingly violated the law. This is my perspective on it. This should have been voted to move on to debate, if for nothing else, to get dialogue moving. What agitates me about both parties is this. This is partisan politics at its finest. We have a national crisis going on here. We need police reformation. Something needs to be done, not just for the citizens, not just for the African Americans, but also for protection of police officers and proper training for police officers. This is something that's important. At this point, who cares who pushes the goddamn boulder down the hill? Shouldn't we just get the debate rolling? Yeah, falling 5 votes short from having a discussion. Ridiculous. 50 years ago, I would sit in my mom's living room. I'd sit on the floor and I would be glued to her black and white TV. And I would watch as these people on the street called Sesame instructed me on the virtues of cooperation, something that I have taken with me for 50 years. You know what? I think our elected officials could use just a little bit of Bert and Ernie in their lives. Hey, learn to cooperate. Quit playing with the American public. Welcome to From the Cheap Seats, our second segment. We are going to talk with Dr. Hilary Anger Elfenbein, professor at Washington University. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome. You teach a unique subject at Washington University. Can you describe the subject? It really fascinates me.
Thank you. Thank you. So I did a joint PhD in psychology and business, and I teach what's called organizational behavior. So that's the umbrella term for psychologists and sociologists working in business schools, trying to understand basically human behavior, how people tick in their lives at work. And it's a lot of fun. So my own research actually is largely about emotion in the workplace, emotion in negotiations, and I do work on emotional intelligence at work. And the kinds of courses I teach are courses like leadership and negotiations, women in leadership, cross-cultural management, these kinds of topics that for me are a lot of fun. So
Yeah.
I have a good time.
Now, your background was not, your undergraduate degree wasn't in management leadership. You have a very unique
Yeah.
niche, I guess you could
Yeah,
say.
I think I have a double major that no one else has done before. I double majored in physics and Sanskrit language, the ancient language of India.
Hmm.
And not very common. Actually, there was like one of us a year at Harvard majoring in Sanskrit. And so we all were very close. We still keep in touch. None of us went on in Sanskrit.
Well, what could you do? I don't know. Really quick, what piqued your interest in an ancient writing style?
I read, we had to read epics in high school, and I read the introduction to a translation of the Bhagavad Gita, which is this famous poem in Sanskrit. And the introduction talked about how untranslatable the words are and how beautiful it is. And I thought it was already beautiful, and if it was more beautiful in the original, that I needed to do it. I still had my language requirement to fulfill, and I thought, why not just do something that's just a little bit different? And I liked it more than I liked physics, but with physics, I felt like I could actually tell people what I was majoring in, so
Oh,
I
yeah.
stuck it out.
Well,
When grandma asks, "What are you doing that I'm helping to pay for?" And you can't tell your grandma that she's spending her savings on Sanskrit.
it's easier to say physics. Yeah, that relates.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the dynamics that you went through as an instructor when the shutdown due to COVID had you transition from online or from live classrooms to online. Did you have much of a warning that this was going to happen? Kind of go through those days.
We had very little warning because the situation kept evolving so quickly, and I think the university did a great job of keeping us informed. But all of it happened quickly, and we had essentially no notice. So in the beginning of March, we started to get inklings that there was going to be a travel ban on international travel for faculty and staff, which didn't seem bad enough. Although a lot of us travel, I actually when the ban came through, I was 4 days away from getting on a flight to Australia for a trip of a lifetime with my 9-year-old. And so that, although that wasn't so bad to miss international travel, then there were rumors the next week that we were going to have a domestic travel ban. And then the next week after that, we were told that all courses were going to go online starting after spring break. And I actually remember that it was Wednesday at lunchtime when that announcement was made because I was teaching a spring break course. So I teach the professionals, the working adults, professionals and executives who go to school part-time, and we do intensive courses. So I'll teach a 36-hour course, literally 36 business hours straight through, Monday through Friday, 8:45 to 5 o'clock straight through, which is amazing because you and I know each other through comedy, and we're used to having 5 minutes, maybe 12 minutes on stage, and I'm used to on stage for 8 hours with a lunch break.
Yeah.
So I was in the middle of one of those, and this email comes through saying all classes are going online after spring break. And I thought, well, we're on spring break. Do I need to go online literally this afternoon? And I told the students, listen, if you're uncomfortable because of the disease, I will find an alternative assignment for you. But if you're comfortable, we're going to slip below the radar screen and finish our course, which we did. But the next week after that, they took a week off to let us prepare. And then there it was. Courses, just people had never taught online before. All of a sudden, there we were learning new technology, new pedagogy, right? It's a completely different way of teaching when you're online.
Yeah, without a template, were were you left up to your own devices to figure it out, or did they say, okay, try this, this might work, so on and so forth?
On the technology side, we were very well supported. So they had all kinds of sessions, information sessions, private help with learning to use Zoom. And there are a lot of features in Zoom that you use with teaching that are easy versus harder to learn the ins and outs of. So I think a good class has a lot of breakout sessions.
Yeah.
So you can use the breakout room feature to put people into smaller groups for discussion. And I do a lot of that actually because my classes are largely experiential.
Yeah.
So I do a negotiations course where I'll literally give one person information to be a buyer, one person information to be a seller. I'll put them together and say, all right, come up with a deal. Make a deal over here and tell me what your deal was. Put it on the whiteboard. And so you can do that over Zoom. So the technology was very well supported, but the part where you're actually teaching the art of instruction, there were various webinars out there, but
Yeah.
you kind of have to learn by doing. And then you have these poor students where they have every single instructor is learning by doing. But I think the students had a great attitude about it.
Do you feel like that your students receive quality classroom time?
I do. I think that they received the closest possible to their original, to the original. And I have since taught, so my spring break course slipped under the radar screen and we finished it live, but I've taught that week-long course since then. I did it in the end of May. And my honest assessment is that they got as much out of the course itself, and what they missed, the one thing I think they really did miss out on was networking with each other.
Yeah.
That social fabric that the students get when they connect, because especially during our day long, we have breaks, we have lunch, where we have the informal interaction with the experiential exercises where people are putting their answers on the whiteboard, you're chatting with your neighbors, and people really get to know each other, and we didn't have any of that on Zoom. But I think in terms of the actual knowledge base of what you're trying to convey, I found that was possible over Zoom. But you had to do a few things to make sure, because the problem with online teaching, I thought the biggest problem my colleagues have faced is engagement. Are people actually paying attention? Because you see your email come in on the bottom of the screen. It flashes at you, and how do you not check your email? So
Certainly.
I did two things. I mean, how do you not, right? And how do you not pull up your email, pull up Facebook, and no one can tell what you're doing? So I did two things. I made people keep their cameras on, and I made them keep their microphones on. And I told them, I need you to do this because I need to know if my jokes land. So it's for me, it's my vanity that I need you to do this. But I said, you need to be here with your full self. And it's really hard to be fully present with your whole self when you're online. But if you do it, then it's actually really magical, because the rooms I teach in, I can see everyone's faces, but I can't see them all at the same time.
Yeah.
And now Zoom almost has this kind of intimacy when you're teaching, because my classes are in the 20s in terms of attendance. So I'll have anywhere from 19 to 36 people, and the average will be the mid 20s. And that's enough people. That number of people still fits in one screen. And so you can see those faces. And now it's actually kind of intimate, oddly, because you're just a few feet away from everyone's faces. And you can see them all at the same time.
And so you can see their names with them, so you can remember names easier.
That's right. I make people in class have name tags. Actually, everyone has a name card in front of them. And the desks are designed to they have built-in name card holders. So I can call on people, but now it is easier. The harder part, though, is remembering what each person said. That may seem odd, but in class, I'll remember where in the room a comment came from. So I'll remember that it was the second row this direction. But in Zoom, the people keep moving around where they are on the screen.
Yeah.
So I won't remember, and that makes class participation grading a little harder. But
now,
it's this whole thing, no one was prepared for it, but I think everyone's had a good attitude. The faculty, I think, have had a good attitude. The students thanks so much. Thankfully, so much they've really been patient about the fact that we're all just blundering through this together.
Now, your colleagues that are like in different disciplines that have like labs,
Yeah.
how do you replicate a lab through Zoom? I don't see how you can.
You can't. I mean, some of it's done with demos, like there'll be demonstrations, but you just can't. And
Yeah.
so that has not been possible. I think art classes, art studio classes, some of them mailed materials home to people wherever in the world they went after spring break. But that is something that suffers, and especially the faculty side of, if you work in a lab, your work your work took a pause in a way that the work of a psychologist didn't. So in my research, I collect data through surveys, through experiential exercises, and all of that was amenable to Zoom. In fact, a lot of it I did online anyway.
Yeah.
Just to avoid data entry. If somebody's taking a survey, it's easier to give them the survey through SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics or one of these online survey. So for me, there was very little interruption. And I can work from home relatively easily, but my friends, for example, in biomedical engineering, right, they had to just shut down their labs.
Yeah. Now, I've got 2 students who were in college last year, and this year I will have a senior, a junior, and a freshman in college. I'm going to 2 different schools. My son and my daughter, who's a senior, are both going to be going to Truman State. And there's a lot of ambiguity right now about the semester, and a lot of that is highlighted with, we see there are pockets of spikes throughout the country. From your perspective, what are the probabilities that you're going to start the semester as usual?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And there was a cartoon that was floating around that had a fortune teller with a crystal ball saying, I can tell you when you're going to die, I can tell you if you'll fall in love, but I can't tell you whether school's going to start in September. And he was wearing a shirt that said Emory on it. And so it's been a bit of a crystal ball, but I can tell you just my understanding from within WashU is that they are doing everything they possibly can to be in person.
Yeah.
They are turning over every stone. And what it looks like the likelihood is going to be that for smaller classes, there'll be enough room for social distancing that they're going to do it. And for medium-sized classes, the idea, at least for now, is that they're going to have rotation. So half the class is in person while the other class is tuning in. Then next time the other half the class is in person and the first half is tuning in, so that people can still rotate through that in-person experience. The larger classes, for the most part, are probably still going to be online, because how do you socially distance yourself in Math 101? How do you do it?
Yeah.
So, but I think the hard part, and for you as a parent of college age kids, I'm interested in your perspective on it. I think the hard part is replicating the college experience.
Yeah, I want my kids to have the college experience, of course. My oldest daughter, the one who's going to be a junior, and there's a reason why the daughter they're the same age in school, but my one daughter, she kind of flew past the other daughter because my other daughter is a piano major and she's very into her music, and she did not want to miss anything, so she has kind of gone at her own pace. But my 2 daughters, my daughter Evelyn has been at Missouri, or at Truman State, and she has an apartment with friends. She stayed up there for the summer working. My other daughter, she will be starting her junior year at Missouri State, and so she's getting an apartment with friends. And what really kind of hit me was my son the other day when he was showing me his roommate, and I've been in the rooms in the dorm he's at because my daughter was there as a freshman, so I knew exactly what the room layout was. And he's going to be like 4 feet from his roommate, because their bunks are right together. And then I remembered my son has had COVID, so maybe he's immune, so I shouldn't even
Yeah.
worry about it. But I want them to have the college experience, and I hope they get the semester rolling, and I hope they can finish it. I know they're trying to have everything finished by Thanksgiving break, and then do exams online or through Zoom or something. So they're trying their best, but as we experienced in the spring, a lockdown can happen overnight. I
Yeah.
mean, one day we're all at work and the next day we're all at home, and we were home for months. So I hope for my kids' perspective, at least the first semester gets done. I'm really hoping that my son gets his first taste of college and it's not interrupted. But what's your perspective? Do you see that the semester is going to make it all the way through, or do you see there's a possibility they're going to have to shut it down?
We've been told be prepared at any time to go fully online. Now, as you're planning, be prepared that a second wave could hit at any moment, and whatever in-person curriculum you have, it needs to be flexible and ready to transition.
Yeah.
So that's the instructions that we've been given. And
Well,
so I think they have a contingent plan, right? That if the city and state have certain restrictions, they're going to honor those restrictions. If those restrictions change, they can loosen up or tighten up as required. It's tough though. The part that I don't think we'll be able to replicate is going to games, or I'm not a huge fan of fraternities, but I think that has a big place at WashU. The theater, there's shows. I mean, you can't socially distance yourself in a musical.
yeah.
And there's just a lot of activity on campus, student groups, affinity groups, and all kinds of student activities, a cappella. All that is just bound to be out.
Yeah, even if they do make it through the whole semester, it's not going to be a total college experience, because a lot of the social clubs, Greek life, sporting activities just aren't going to be around. And it's almost going to be like going to boarding school, I guess you could say. We go to class, we come home, we do our homework, we go to bed, and we miss mom and dad. I hope they miss mom and dads.
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of people are going to be off campus. I think it'll be almost more like a job.
Yeah.
You don't expect your workplace to supply you with all kinds of entertainment outside of what you're doing. And that total experience that students have, where it's like they're in their own country almost.
Yeah.
They're almost going abroad to this self-contained microcosm of the world. And
Yeah.
that's, I feel sad for them. And then the question is, what do you do instead, right? Do students take a gap year? And if they do take a gap year, gap semester, what are they going to do instead? Because everything's closed, right? What would be the meaningful? They're certainly not going to travel the world the way. So I took a gap year in the middle of college, and I just took all my frequent flyer miles that I had earned flying back and forth between Boston and New York. And they gave all kinds of bonuses for these trips, because mostly it was business travelers doing it. And I was just going home to have dinner and come back that night. And so I had amassed this fortune of frequent flyer miles. I traveled around the world, and that's not what that option's not available to them.
No, not at all.
So the question I think for every student is, what are they going to do? What would they do instead? What's the opportunity cost? And what we worry about as a university is enough students, what we call the melt. You have students who've applied, who've accepted your offer, but they don't all show up. And we call that the melt. So you accept more students than you can accommodate, because you assume some of them aren't going to show. And then for us right now, we have no clue what that melt is going to be, because of COVID, right? Some people can't get visas. Some people, they can't enter the U.S. And that is a huge deal, because university finances are partly fueled by international students. They don't need financial aid. They come in large numbers. They're delighted to get U.S. degrees. There's a program called OPT where once you get a university advanced degree, you can work in the U.S. without another visa for some period of time. All of that's going away. Trump's getting rid of these incentive programs that help to make the U.S. the center of the world for educational excellence, and it fuels the economy, right? The H-1B visas that he just last week is trying to get rid of, these things fuel the economy because you have the brightest people, you have this brain drain all around the world, people are coming here. So we don't know if people can get visas. We don't know if these students who are paying full tuition even can show up. And we also don't know, will college students feel that the experience is worth showing up for? Because WashU tuition, I mean, it's like $60,000 a year.
Yeah, it's up there.
Do you want to pay? I mean, I lose track of the exact dollar value, but it's in the $60,000 order of magnitude. Do you want to pay that for your kid, basically to have school be like a job? They just show up, then they go home.
Yeah. Well, we do have to wrap this up, but I do want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for your insight. I do wish you the best of luck, whether it's going to be Zoom or in a classroom. I hope you have a great semester. And we are both in a comedy contest coming up here, and I want to wish you the best of luck unless you're going against me, okay?
Thank you, and likewise.
All right, thank you.
Great to talk to you. I enjoyed it.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. Hey, wasn't Dr. Elfenbein great? Welcome to our third segment. On Friday, June 26th, the president tweeted, "I just had the privilege of signing a very strong executive order protecting American monuments, memorials, and statues and combating recent criminal violence. Long prison terms for these lawless acts against our great country." Now, I want to tell you, there is a part of me that really gets this. I mean, we have monuments and statues depicting all kinds of things from our history. And we're not quite sure where we draw the line. You know, is it the same as we take down a statue of Robert E. Lee, who fought for the Confederacy? How about Andrew Jackson, who was a president, but he was a very racist president, and he was the author of the Trail of Tears for the Cherokee? Where do we draw the line? We don't know. We can't just go tearing down every memorial and statue in the United States. Every person that we have deified via a statue, we will find they have their character flaws because, hey, we're all human beings. But I have the solution. I know where we draw that line. On this day, which is the 27th of June, we draw the line at Confederate monuments. Now, hear me out a little bit. The Confederacy was a blip on the timeline of this country. The Confederacy was only around for 5 years. Was it even a real country? Gosh, we can debate that, but in my mind, wasn't really a free country because they never really got to a point where they were sovereign during a peacetime period. Now, you can sugarcoat this with the war was over and states' rights and some other bullshit, but this war was fought over the institution of enslaving human beings by the Confederacy. The Civil War was not fought over state rights. The Civil War was not fought over, we do not need a powerful central government. That's all window dressing to say, hey, we the Confederacy, we're going to leave the Union because, by golly, we want slavery. We are superior to African Americans. We should enslave them. That's what this war was about. So let's just remove all the Confederate monuments. Every Confederate monument is about heritage. I have people who are saying, oh, you know, the flag, the Confederate flag is about heritage. All these monuments are about heritage. You're right, it is about heritage. It's about the very terrible heritage of enslaving human beings. That's what it's about. You've all seen the memes of, why don't we have statues of Kaiser Wilhelm III? Why don't we have statues of Benito Mussolini? Why don't we have statues of Adolf Hitler litter across Germany and Europe? Why don't we have these monuments? because these monuments would represent an evil regime. And I'm sorry, those of you who sympathize with the Confederacy was an evil regime because they were trying to hold on to the institution of enslaving human beings. Now, the people advocating that this is a part of history and we don't want to erase history might want to crack a book open as opposed to staring at monuments. You know, I could stare at a monument of, oh, let's say I'm an hour away from the monument to Robert Wadlow, who was nearly 9 foot tall, the tallest verified man ever to walk the face of the earth. I can go see that monument. What's that monument tell me? Hey, there was a really tall dude here. But when I open up the history book and I actually read about him, that's when I find out about him. So these monuments are not erasing history. History is in the books. And if you're too lazy to read a book on history and would rather watch a statue, I don't know what I can tell you. All we need are the books. We don't need the monuments. Hey, if you've made it this far, I am very, very proud of you. Welcome to our last segment of From the Cheap Seats. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to realize that we are having a major spike in COVID-19. As you can see by the map, which was updated June 27th, the major spikes have been in the South, and there are two factors that are contributing to this. Number one, we are now a month away from the mass gatherings that we had on Memorial Day. So yeah, the incubation period is over and people are exhibiting the signs of the illness. They're getting tested. We're finding out they have illness. They're passing it on to people. So you have this major spike. Second reason that we are having this major spike is because we now test more people. Yeah, that's what the president said. That's why we're having this major spike, is because we're testing more people. I don't know, but anyway, that's a whole nother ball of wax we can, I don't know, sink our teeth into. Florida is seeing a record daily increase in cases. Just yesterday on Friday, June 26th, nearly 9,000 new cases of COVID-19. According to Dr. Fauci, he used to be on the TV every day, but then when we decided as a country that COVID didn't exist anymore, it kind of faded to the back. He's still there. And he gives a few reasons that in some places, we simply opened up too early. And I think we can all agree on that. Some places didn't enforce the proper guidelines. Now, there were suggestions out there, but there wasn't real enforcement. When we were told to wear masks, man, I could go to my local grocery store right down the road from me. No one's wearing a mask there. And some people, for their own reasons, have decided to completely ignore what the scientists say. They want to rely on their own redneck intellect and defy what the experts say, so they are ignoring the guidelines. I can call people rednecks because I'm a redneck, okay? You see, I'm amazed that this virus didn't go away on April 7th. Why?
Wind!
Wind!
Almighty!
Almighty!
Strong!
Strong!
South wind!
South wind!
Heat!
Heat!
Burn this thing!
Burn this thing!
In the name of Jesus!
In the name of
Satan, you bow your knee!
Satan, you bow your knee.
You fall on your face!
You fall on your face.
COVID-19!
COVID-19.
I blow the wind of God
The wind of God
on you.
on you.
You are destroyed forever,
You are destroyed forever.
and you will never be back.
And you'll never be back.
Come on, Reverend Copeland. You got rid of this virus. What the hell are we doing 3 months later with still a virus after you blew it away? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't mean to offend people who are followers of Kenneth Copeland, But, if you feel like that, funding him to the tune of $790 million, what his net worth is, you would think that with all that money that he's come up with from his followers, that he would at least be able to be effective when he blows away COVID. Guess what, Kenneth Copeland? You suck. So we still have a spike in COVID, and we're going to continue to have a spike in COVID as long as we act like this disease does not exist. Thank you for watching From the Cheap Seats, our third episode. Tune in next week where we will have episode number 4, and we will have more riveting content from today's news. Thank you.
Then sang Moses and the children of Israel this song unto the Lord. COVID-19,
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 COVID-19.
I blow the wind of God from the state of Washington to the state of Maine to Brownsville, Texas, and the tip of Florida. Today, we speak to this atmosphere. Today, burn this thing. This virus hates heat. You just burn this thing. Burn, burn. I call for a supernatural heat wave straight out of hell. Burn, burn. COVID-19,
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 COVID-19.
I blow the wind of God. You don't do it. You don't do it. You don't do it. You get out of here now. Burn. You don't do it. You don't do it. You don't do it. You get out of here. Burn this thing. COVID-19,
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 COVID-19.
I blow the wind of God. You are destroyed forever, and you'll never be back.
What the fuck, bro?